when you assess what you can and can't control, there's a lot of stuff in your life that really hasn't got anything to do with you, other people's opinions, and even to some point the way you look and things like that. So for me, those were ideas that I'd never really thought of before. And I was spending so much time, and I had done my whole life, people pleasing and worrying about what people thought of me and whether I was doing a good job. Was I a good parent? Was I a good everything else? And I wasn't really taking into consideration the fact that a lot of this stuff is out of my control, and the stuff that is in my control, I've already got plans for it. I'm already doing the things towards it, so that I don't need to be worrying about it endlessly.
Hello, it's Nat here, your co-host at Life Changes with Adventure Solos.
From the Fonz-esque lifestyle of sex, drugs and spreadsheets, on this episode of Life Changes with Adventure Solos, Chris and I sit down and speak to Nick Bunney about his life change. Nick went from city broker to self-help junkie, reading everything he could about philosophy, self-help and therapy, and eventually writing a handbook to help others find their happy. It's somewhat of a roller coaster story. That's actually an in-joke. Listen to find out more. From materialism and pressures of a career in the city to finding a more authentic version of himself and ultimately looking to pass on what he's learnt in a practical way through his book. There's loads to take away from this episode. Not only Nick's story and discussions on self-discovery, but also the one where Nick shat himself up a mountain. Or was that Chris? I can't quite remember. The time Nick thought he was Gandhi before checking himself, and the secret to fixing all men forever. Well, that last one is a bit clickbaity and it's made up, but the rest is all there. So listen up.
If you'd like to learn more about Adventure Solos events, please visit adventuresolos.com and enter your details to sign up to the mailing list. So who are we speaking to today?
Well, I've got a little bit of a story actually, because about 3.5 years ago, on one of the Wild Camping for Beginners events, there was a woman named Helen on it. And we went for a little walk on the second day. So we'd got our tent set up and stuff, and we went for a little walk around this lake in the Lake District. And so there was a group of us there, but partway, Helen is self-employed as well. And partway round, Helen said to me, "What are your values?" And she was, and I didn't really know what she meant, but we'd been talking sort of business. And I was like, "Do you mean for me or for the company?" And she was like, "Well, both or either. Like, what are your values?" And I wanted to give her an answer, but I didn't really know what she meant. And I sort of knew what she was getting at, but I didn't know what my values were. And that really stuck with me. So Helen does actually have her own coaching company. That's part of what she does. She does some property stuff as well. But that's always stuck with me. And like, yeah, I just feel, although I've never fully written them down and defined them, I have been much more conscious about what are my values. And I think some of that is just like what's important to me, what values do I hold, and what feeds through to the business. And they are very closely related. And this is all about being authentic and all this stuff. So today we're speaking to a guy called Nick. He's written a book, but it's kind of a workbook. And so what we're going to do as we go towards the end of the episode is a little exercise where the listener can join in. So basically you're going to need a bit of pen and a bit of paper, and it talks you through this core value proposition, which is not just identifying and discovering what your values are and what's important to you, but discovering what ones you can take actions on. And it's this really interesting little worksheet that we're going to go through, and it pops out with some tangible actions at the end. So I'm quite excited about that. So yeah, we're speaking to a guy called Nick today.
So I've heard we've got our first Patreon. Tell me what's going on with that.
Yeah, we have our new Patreon supporter, our first ever Patreon supporter. So many thanks to Stu.
Shout out, Stu.
Shout out to Stu. So Patreon, Nat, we should give a bit of an explainer for what Patreon is. I think we've mentioned it on 1 or 2 episodes, but go on, I'll hand over to you. What's Patreon?
Patreon, I understand, is like a kind of supporters club for things like podcasts, isn't it? So people can sign up. You've created the different bandings, haven't you, for Patreon for people to support us. So why don't you tell people about them?
Patreon, yeah, as you say, there's different levels, but basically this podcast takes effort, time, cost to produce. We've found that out actually because I've been spending 25% of my time on it over the last few months. You're doing this out of the kindness of your heart kind of thing, and it takes a lot of effort. I won't go on to too much, it's not a sob story or anything, but what the Patreon thing is, it allows people to go up and sign up, and they do get a couple of things from it at the moment. So as you say, there's different tiers. I think the sort of basic tier is £3 a month or $5. I'm not sure which it comes out as, but roughly £3 a month. And for that, you get a shout out on the show. And we also have some mugs. You've actually got a mug, but yeah, we've got some life changes.
Old school logo, haven't I? Because we've just changed the logo. So Saskia got that made up for Christmas, but then I had to break her heart by telling her we've got a new logo.
You can have 2 mugs with a logo on either side. So yeah, new branding, like everything's a work in progress, eh? So yeah, those mugs are on order, and Stu's gonna get posted a mug as well as us chatting about him today, which won't be normal. You just normally get a shout out. So yeah, that's Patreon. Hi, Nick. Welcome to the Life Changes podcast. I thought I would start off as we do with most of our guests and throw them under the bus by chucking everything at them and saying, who are you?
Just a nice, easy question. Thanks for having me on. I'm really happy to be here. My name's Nick Bunney. I'm a 42-year-old husband and father of 2. I live in Essex on one of those lovely train lines into London. And at the moment I work in the city, but I'm also an aspiring author and some other things in there as well that hopefully we'll touch on later.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, great to have you on, Nick. Thanks for your time. I'm sure this will be really interesting to the listeners and lots of things for them to learn, I think, in this episode. I'd like to understand a little bit more about you. Who is Nick? Every journey has its starting point. Can you paint a picture of your early life for our listeners? What were your passions, inspirations, or even like hurdles that you had to overcome that contributed to your story?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons I'm so happy to be here, because I quite like the idea of the podcast where the title is about life changing, right? So like you said, there has to be a sort of almost a before and after, should we say, but it isn't always that simple, I don't think, is it? And so my childhood was what most people would call a normal childhood. I grew up in East London on the Essex border. I was quite a happy kid. I was an only child, and I did all the things that I thought that's what life was meant to look like. So I went to school, I got good grades, I went to a grammar school, I did relatively well there, I stayed out of trouble, I didn't touch drugs, all the kind of stuff you get told. And then I went to university and onwards and upwards. But when I look back, and sometimes I know that there's a little bit of an aversion to therapy from Chris's camp, which maybe we'll get onto later on. But
it's not an aversion.
Yeah, he hasn't got around to it yet. That's right.
I just haven't. Yeah.
We'll get it for you as a retirement present. No, so I went, when I did go back and have a look at it, I think one of the important things that comes out of it when you're retrospective is not to blame those around you and stuff like that. So it's very important to say that when you're talking about your childhood, because I think our parents' generation would look at what I'm about to say and probably go, oh shit, like, did I cause this or did I do that? And I don't think it really works like that. Everyone's doing the best they can, and you're just dealing with the situation that you're given. So when I go back and sort of layer through that sort of perfect childhood, which if you'd have asked me at 18, I would have said, oh, my childhood's perfect. My dad left when I was 4. And my mum struggled quite a bit with sort of eating issues, and obviously the sort of depression and struggle that comes with being a single parent and all the stuff that comes with that. And so early memories are kind of muddled between 2 different places. I'm going to visit my dad, who was fairly wealthy, and my mum was doing really well for herself considering where we grew up. It was a bit of a rough area in East London. And but I felt like I didn't really belong in either place, and so I ended up spending some of my time with my dad, who's a bit like, fuck it, let's do it. If he was like, what takeaway do you want, and you couldn't decide, you'd get both. He was very like affluent and flashy and everything else, and then my mum was very reserved, and it keeps track of things like how much money she spent on milk, or like keeps books and records. That was her job when she was working. So she's still got loads of blue books everywhere. Every month's shopping for probably, if I asked her how much she spent on electricity in 1987, she could probably tell you. And so they're very two contrasting backgrounds. And so when I then passed my 11 plus, I went to a grammar school, which was a long way out of the area. It was like an hour's bus out of the area, with a bright red tie and blazer. And our local school, I mean, it makes me think of the kind of very archetypal movie rough area school, and then the kid that's going to the posh school is getting not picked on necessarily, but funny looks, and kind of like, you're off to the gay school because it's a boys' school, and all the other stuff that comes with that kind of thing, right? And then obviously when I turn up at the grammar school, I don't fit in there either, because I'm turning up scruffy, and well, not necessarily scruffy, but it sort of like, I don't know whether this is a term you're familiar with, but sort of more of a rude boy kind of
The
yeah,
Essex teaser.
yeah, sort of persona, with the kind of like spliffy jumper and like Reebok pump trainers and all this kind of stuff. And obviously
That's spliffy.
yeah, exactly. So trying to look like from the streets, should we say, and then everyone from that school is from the local area, and they were all expecting to get into the school, and it was just, they all had tutors and nice houses and everything else. So there's a lot of conflict, and so I found myself people pleasing early on, because depending on where I was, and I still do it now, like, this isn't even my real accent, no, not really, but I found myself putting things on, and it means that I was able to bounce between groups of people quite comfortably, but it does mean that you lose sort of a little bit of yourself in all of that.
So yeah, so you kind of almost a little bit boy from the other side of the tracks type feeling. But how did you do at school? I mean, were you excelling kind of academically?
Well, at primary school, I did excel because they put me up a year. So like, I was doing well. So that when I should have been going into year 5, they put me into year 6. And I think what they were trying to do is establish if I could go to secondary school a year early. And the problem was that when that wasn't possible, I ended up staying in year 6 twice. And so all the people I'd made friends with in my class ended up going off to secondary school, and then I stayed behind for another year again. And so, I mean, I'm only just thinking of that now, remembering that now, and obviously that's another kind of out of place kind of feeling. And I think there's been a lot of senses of like rejection or kind of not fitting in. I've got a real fear of not being validated, or not being enough, I suppose, that comes from parents breaking up, and then also these two school situation. Now ultimately, when you say boy from the other side of the tracks, the funny thing is that I'm not that much of a bad boy. So when I was back in the other area, I was seen as the kind of kid that's going to a posh school. So it would have been better if I'd have been a sort of like drug smoking criminal who just so happened to go to the grammar school, because at least I would fit into one of those areas. And there's a few. I mean, there was a few of us that were a bit like that. I mean, my closest friends, a few of them I'm still friends with now. They went to the local school because they might not have been as academic, but they still weren't quite the type of kids that were kind of generally in that area. So there is a bit of that. And so but at senior school, I did quite well. I've always been the type to sort of do the bare minimum, generally. So I knew that I could do well.
Did you think that's a boy thing? Like, I think, well, I know me and my peer group were probably similar. Just, yeah, you did enough to get by.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing it now in my son, and I'm seeing it in when I talk to other people. I mean, I've listened a bit on sort of podcasts about the difference between the sexes or whatever it is, and that's obviously a big subject that we don't need to get into. But one of the main takeaways around education is that the school system suits women better than men, or girls better than boys, and boys sort of learn through doing, whereas girls can take the theory on quite easily. And I think it means that school isn't that enjoyable for boys, so that I just did the sort of least that I had to do to get through, and that was fine. I did all right. I got A levels and whatever else. They weren't excellent, like it's not Oxford graduate levels, but I did okay, you know. And then obviously through that whole time frame, I'm still living this almost double life. And obviously at that point now I'm getting into the point where I'm seeing my dad more as a kind of mate, so we could go to the pub together or we can do things that aren't sort of childish. And I suppose that kind of separated me even more because now I'm two different, like I'm growing up in two different ways. So I'm growing up as the kind of son of the guy that's really out loud and outspoken and wants to take you down the pub and have a beer and hear all my mates, look at my son, he's amazing. And then on the other side, in this sort of like other world that was at that time, I had two younger sisters that had come along, sort of 10 years younger than me. So I just spent as much time out of the house as I could when I was back home.
That's probably quite a common feeling situation for kids from divorced childhoods, right? Where you're sort of seeing two completely separate worlds. I like your description there. I certainly had a bit of that, and you're kind of getting different messaging from different people about what life's about and values and all of that type of stuff, which I know we'll come on to. You've talked about that a lot in your book. Why don't we move forward a little bit? You ended up then getting good grades, going to uni in London, didn't you? And then getting a job in the city. So tell us about all of that.
Yeah, so I went to university, and actually my friends and I have spoke about this since, but what happened was is I ended up just leaving everything behind. So when I went to university, the people that I met, everyone was from a different place. We're all in this one place doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. And so for me, I needed to have something central. And at that time, my personality came across better in the sense of it wasn't like when I went to secondary school and I was kind of looked down upon a little bit. Here I was equal with everyone else, and there were no expectations of each other. And so I felt like I found my people when I went to university. And ironically, I'm only friends with a couple of them still now, but at that time, I felt like I'd met a group of people that I could relate to, and girls were more interested because I was more on the level with the people that I was surrounding myself with. And yeah, and it was a really interesting time of life. But I do think now I didn't even go home for Christmas and stuff like that because I was just, there were times where I'd go.
Oh, really?
There's times where I'd go home for a couple of days for Christmas, and my mum would be like, "Oh, you can stay as long as you want," and I was like, "Oh no, I've got work. I've got work. I've got to go back." And then there'd be like maybe 4 or 5 of us that would just be like banging around Barbican, the only people around because it's like a ghost town at that time of year.
What were you up to then? When so you're hanging out with mates at uni and off time, is that right?
Yeah. So there'd just be the group of us. I mean, I suppose now we never spoke about it, but we probably didn't. We're the ones who didn't really fancy going back home. And because we're in London, there's enough to do even if it's quiet. And so yes, we were just drinking and everything else. I mean, I suppose at that point, I mean, my real, if I was to say I had advice, it would be stuff around food. I mean, I work a 12-step program around eating disorders, which isn't really covered in the book, but I have that kind of addictive personality, and I think that type of personality lends itself to someone who is experiencing these kind of what you would call a defect of character, in the sense of someone who feels like they need validation and is worried about rejection and things like that. So I was the one who would be drinking and do the stupid thing, or climb on top of the car, or neck the drink, or take his clothes off, and that kind of stuff. And because everyone thought it was one,
You were the prank monkey.
exactly right, yes, exactly. And when I came into contact with these types of people, it was, and they were loving it, I suppose. I mean, I suppose if I spoke to them now, they might go, "Fucking hell, who's that idiot from university?" But it felt like everyone was sort of really getting on, and there was lots of sex and drinking and everything else. And I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I'd gone to a boys' school where everyone was a bit like meh, and from a sort of rough area where the people I was hanging around with weren't really interested in me. I mean, my friends were, but as in girls and strangers weren't that interested. And then I went to university, and everyone I met was like, "Hey, you're pretty cool." I felt like the fucking Fonz, which is a bit of an aged,
Yeah.
a bit of an aged reference for your younger viewers. But yeah, so it felt great, and we all got on. It felt like we were this kind of like little family, and so obviously ended up failing my first year because it was a little bit too much to do it all at once. But eventually I turned around. I moved course because, funnily enough, when I was at school, I said I wanted to design roller coasters, and they said, "Oh, that's too cutthroat. You should work in the city." And
Where it's nice and gentle.
yeah, where it's nice and friendly. And I didn't know that. I mean, they were saying, they made it out to me like it's like dog eat dog, and yeah, I can just picture it now, like rooms of executives like arguing over where the loop should go and all this kind of stuff. And
what, when you say about the designing roller coasters and you got put off that path, so to speak, we spoke to a guy called Mark recently, and he said a very similar thing. He wanted to be a rugby player, and he was told as a kid by his teachers, like, sort of, no, what you need to do is study, get your A levels, go to uni, sort of thing. And he was like, there was no pathway to my dream, I think, something along those lines. And do you think that was the same for you? Like, the people around you didn't know how to get you into designing roller coasters, so they pushed you into
exactly,
a route that they did know.
Well, yeah, I mean, something that I mentioned in the book and that your guest says like perfectly there, probably better than I've said it, so I might steal it. But it's that effectively, like, when you're doing something for someone else, whether it might not be that you're doing this career path for someone else, but it's a more commonly trodden path, and so it's a lot easier to funnel children. I mean, I visited schools for my son recently, and they're talking about how to make them more rounded and how they'll reduce the amount of homework so that they can do other clubs and stuff like that, make them better people. If you're on the debating team, then you don't have to do this and da da da. And so they're kind of promoting a rounded individual, whereas in the 90s in a grammar school in East London, just outside of East London, it was just grades and that was it. Can't remember doing much of anything else. So I think they were sort of, the only thing that was really for them was just what the grades they got and how many kids they can say went to university, right? And so they're funneling you into this system, and it's not necessarily on purpose. It's just the way most people do it. And so that's what ended up happening to me ultimately. I'm not saying that roller coasters would have been the way forward, but I'm only now finding things that are giving me that purpose that I think is really important. Like there's a famous, I think it's a psychiatrist called Marty Seligman, and he came up with this thing called the PERMA model, and the P stands for purpose, and that ties in with what your guest said and what I'm trying to promote, which is that if you don't have a driver internally for the things you're doing, then sooner or later you'll either get, at the very best, you'll get bored of them, and at the very worst, you'll get depressed because there's this kind of cognitive dissonance between what you should be doing based on this kind of storyline that you've had sort of given to you, and then what you want to be doing. What's good for you, and that starts for a lot of people in that exact place. I mean, I still work in the city now, but when I get on the train and I see the kids going in to start being stockbrokers, which is what I eventually went to do, I finished my degree and I got a first class degree, and I was really happy, and everyone was chuffed. And then I went straight into work, and that was it. I wanted to be a broker. I mean, I say stockbroker now because it's a more generic term, but technically I was a futures and options broker. But that's what I wanted to do, because I wanted the money, and I wanted the Rolex, and I wanted the this, and I wanted the that. And I see kids on the train now, and they're talking to each other, and they've all got hangovers. Oh, I stayed up doing coke till 4 a.m. Ha ha ha. Going into work today. Oh yeah, da 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 da. This girl, she works in the office. She's fit. And I could just hear the exact same conversations, and I know that none of these kids were at secondary school going, I want to be a broker, because that just isn't taught. We don't learn that as a subject. We just see it on the telly and know that that's the kind of high earning job within the city, right? And so everyone just follows the same path. And your guess was right.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because I do think, obviously, this is part of the story, but your book, you talk about being authentic, and we'll come on to that in a little bit. But it's funny that as a society, I guess, because being authentic is about doing what aligns with your values and stuff like this, which we'll come on to. But I think what you're kind of saying, and which I really do agree with, but you've never explicitly thought about this. Society is pushing us into certain things, intentionally or unintentionally, which are not what people maybe inherently want to be doing. As you say, you as a boy wanted to be a roller coaster designer, and the person now who's a stockbroker, yeah, probably had some other passion as well, but we're just getting funneled into this. I guess it's all back to materialism and capitalism and getting a good job and all this sort of stuff, but it's been a little less authentic unintentionally. We're just kids at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And also, I mean, I try not to go in the sort of extremes of any like viewpoint, and I know there'd be a lot of people, maybe some listening, that may be very anti-capitalist, or they may be a certain way. For me, like, I think that over time we've built these systems up, and they have to operate in the way that they are operating at the moment. And so if 90% of school kids turned around and went, actually, fuck this, we're not going to go to university, we're all going to go and become YouTubers, the economy would collapse because it's built on certain industries. And so, and we see that happening, whether it's quite often unintentionally, when you have things like age gaps and an aging demographic, or you have more women in the workplace or more men or whatever. These are just like the socioeconomic, like, elements that build up societies, right? So I don't think there's a sort of like govern of lizards that all live underneath Buckingham Palace and sort of making children go and be stockbrokers. But I just think that we need people working in the finance industry to keep it going, because the finance industry powers the machine. And so that's just kind of how it happens.
And you're attracted in, I mean, in terms of your story, you're attracted into this world by, I suppose it's like the ultimate kind of hedonistic, materialistic, dopamine hit fueled world, is it?
I know that other people I know who are in that industry are going to listen to this, so I can't lie and say it's like the movies or it's like Wall Street, because a lot of the time it's boring. And we used to say, like, in terms of the day-to-day job, it's a bit like being a goalkeeper for Man City, probably not at the time because they were shit at that point, but 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 in the sense of, you don't have to do anything, but when you do have to do it, you have to do it quick and you have to be accurate. So like, trading isn't a case of you're just trading non-stop. It's a case of when the opportunities arise, then you do it. And so then, in that reactive sense, there's a dopamine hit to that. What's more appealing, and I think that's what you're alluding to, is the lifestyle that goes around the job, because you have to do longer hours. I mean, generally you might start at 6:30 in the morning and finish at, I mean, you finish relatively early, maybe 4:30, 5:00, but you might go out with clients and finish late that way. Or at the same with anyone, if you're earning more money, you're more likely to socialize and go out for meals and do things like that. So your life becomes quite busy. And yeah, I mean, in these firms, and it's still the same now, I work in a brokerage right now, and the front office, as we're called, they're seen as, they're the top level of the company, right? So they're doted on by all the other sort of supporting areas. And so there is this you've got high earnings. So like, a lot of the time people are sort of planning their next holiday or their next purchase or whatever. So yeah, I mean, you get sucked into it. I mean, the thing that attracted me to it is that when I joined in some sort of random sort of department, and struck up a friendship with someone who was working for the desk as one of their support people. And I was just watching them being taken out by the brokers all the time, because they're not getting paid very much, and they're doing a lot of the sort of heavy lifting for the brokers, and they're getting taken out and everything. And it just appealed to me. And then you kind of might dabble in drugs here and there. I mean, I think the first time I ever tried, even when I was at university, I didn't even want to do ecstasy or something. A lot of people would do ecstasy at nightclubs and stuff like that, and I'd be petrified. That was around the time where, I can't remember, forgive me for not remembering her name, but there's a girl that died because she didn't drink any water and she dehydrated or something. It was in the sort of like in the late 90s. And yeah, I was petrified. I thought if I touched anything, maybe I'd smoke a bit of weed or something, but if I touched anything chemical, that I'd die instantly. And then when I got to the city,
we had posters up of ecstasy. Yeah.
And then I got to the city, and it was like, oh no, everyone's just doing everything. And so when you start dabbling,
oh really? It's not like the posters.
No, I mean, you dabble in a few of these bits, and when like senior people or people you look up to, or it's I suppose when you're young, the impression you get of things like cocaine, for example, is you think of something like New Jack City or something where it's like crack and like homeless people doing it, and it's not that at all. It's seen as just the same as having a beer for a lot of the people.
So when did you realize that this lifestyle was unhealthy for you, and what kicked off your life change?
The funniest thing really is that it was never really sort of I always had an obsession with exercise, which maybe we'll get onto later on, but that probably comes a little bit from the eating disorder stuff. But the reality is that it wasn't really about the sort of like the health factor. It was certainly about the mindset. It was certainly about how I felt inside. And so, as we said earlier, and as your previous guest said, this authenticity element is the strongest driver for me in a lot of this stuff, because I think when you get to the point where life isn't all 25-year-olds where you're made of like magic and elastic bands and you can just come back from everything and nothing hurts and hangovers last 10 minutes and it doesn't matter if the job's a bit jobs don't matter if they're a bit shit or if they have rough periods because you've got your whole life ahead of you, right? It's only when you get challenged that the fact that you're doing something inauthentic starts kicking off this kind of cognitive dissonance, this struggle where you're like, oh, is this it? I'm not quite sure if I'm enjoying this, but I'm doing the thing that everyone said. I've got a nice house and a nice car, and I've got married.
Like a dissatisfaction.
Yeah, and also you feel guilty for being dissatisfied because you're thinking people would kill for this, and I'm being grumpy or miserable, and it starts to become a little bit too much to take. So as soon as the job starts to become a bit sour, and as soon as you've got young kids and you can't go out as much, or you can go out but then you've got to look after the kids and help at home, then you start having arguments back at home and and so all of a sudden this malcontent builds inside, and I think that's quite a relatable thing to a lot of people, which is kind of why I sort of led into what I led into. But in that moment, what that looked like was I read a book by Derren Brown, the for want of a better word, the magician come philosopher, and it changed my life because there were ideas in there that I'd never heard before. I don't know whether you've read it. It's called Happy, and yeah, it's not written in a very easy to read. I mean, hopefully he's not watching, but in a very easy to read way. But
he's one of our Patreon supporters.
Damn.
He's going to be really pissed off at you.
Well, in which case, I need to get in contact with him because I've quoted him in the book. But yeah, so I mean, the book had loads of stuff about Stoic philosophy in there. That's the main sort of premise of the book. And effectively, what he's saying there is that when you assess what you can and can't control, there's a lot of stuff in your life that really hasn't got anything to do with you, other people's opinions, and even to some point the way you look and things like that. So for me, those were ideas that I'd never really thought of before, and I was spending so much time, and I had done my whole life, people pleasing and worrying about what people thought of me and whether I was doing a good job, was I a good parent, was I a good everything else, and I wasn't really taking into consideration the fact that a lot of this stuff is out of my control, and the stuff that is in my control, I've already got plans for it. I'm already doing the things towards it, so that I don't need to be worrying about it endlessly. But I felt like I was overwhelmed, and I was like, am I really doing what it is I want to do? Because in that idea of control is that you can control your own thoughts and actions. And I was thinking to myself, what is it that's feeding these thoughts and actions? And he spoke about your storyline and things that are given to you by other people that impact how you see yourself in the world. And it was just very interesting. There's an idea in it called, well, he calls it the diagonal, but it's like a graph where on one axis it's how you want the world to be, and on the other axis is how the world wants itself to be. Fate, I suppose you'd call it. And the idea is that every time you try and pull that towards how you want the world to be, particularly these things that you can't control, the world will pull it back. The world will say, no, fuck off, we're in control here, and pull it back. And so you end up with this kind of like disruption, this constant disturbances. And he has this idea that comes from a philosopher called Arthur Schopenhauer, that basically says if you balance through the middle at this kind of x equals y point, or what he called the diagonal, that's where happiness is, where you do your bits, the world does their bits, and you're just happy either way. It doesn't really matter.
It's almost a path of least resistance in a way, isn't it? Because that's interesting. Like, I guess, well, I don't believe in fate. Sorry to upset anyone.
No. I mean, I just use that word.
Yeah, I know. I get it. I think I get it. Which is like, I think what you're saying is there's two things. There's stuff you can control, there's stuff that's going on in the world and that everyone else is doing. And somewhere between those two, there's maybe not necessarily the path of least resistance, but you can't change everyone else and everything else in the world. So you need to take control of what you can, but the rest you sort of need to let it go a bit. Is it something along those lines?
Yeah. I mean, you see that sort of like stuff all over the internet, don't you, and social media, the idea about letting go. And that's exactly it, isn't it? The amount of things we worry about that are outside of our control is phenomenal. It's almost everything that we worry about. And when you pull that stuff apart, what you realise is there actually isn't that much to worry about. other than the stuff that you're getting up to, and then you can make plans for that stuff because you control it. And when I use the word fate, I mean that's the word that the philosophers use, but effectively what we're talking about is fate is effectively externals, things that aren't controlled by you. And you're right, I don't believe in fate either. And interestingly, you say that. If you've ever heard of a book called The Secret, the book where you kind of if you visualize it, then you'll get it. So it's basically this multi-million-pound selling book where if you sort of ask the universe for a Ferrari, you'll get one, and if you don't get one, it's because you didn't ask properly. And yeah, and it's just sold tens and tens and tens of millions of copies. But the reason I brought that up is because in this book it pulls that book apart and says that this kind of positive thinking mindset is damaging people's mental health because when you're so positive and it doesn't happen, these things you can't control, then you tend to blame yourself, and even though that none of it is in your control anyway.
It's like extreme individualism, isn't it? Now we're in this age of extreme individualism where we believe actually everything is down to us. So it's this mix up between you've got to take responsibility, which is true to a certain extent, but there's a lot of other factors in life such as luck and start point and all of these things, and it's quite hard to keep these.
Like if you think about it, there probably is very few things, like big things. Obviously, me moving my arm now is totally up to me, but there's very few things, like if you could pick a single day where nothing in there had a factor that was outside of your control in it. So if you just constantly, I mean, I used to do this all the time. I'd be going, right, well, I'm working so hard, I'm hungover, I'm tired, I'm grumpy, but as long as my weekend goes perfectly, then I can reset and I can go back to work happy. And then your kid will get chicken pox, and then all of a sudden all those things that you planned, like a lay in and the exercise and the healthy eating maybe, or maybe even just like getting some fresh air, all those things go out the window because you've got to look after the baby. And these are the sort of things that were happening, and I was getting enraged and that's why when I read that book, it made me realize, like, come on, like, because I was getting to the point where my wife would tell you, I was just reiterating constantly, like, this is what we need to do, mate. And I was so frightened that things wouldn't go the way I wanted them to go that I'd be constantly drilling them home to everyone, and it kind of makes you a pain in the arse to live with, really.
That's interesting, because I was going to ask, we were talking about stuff in your control or not, and then I was getting a little bit confused about how that related to your life, but you've just answered that question, which is like, I guess, let's say, is it almost like being a perfectionism? You want things to go a certain way, and then when it doesn't, you were just getting frustrated or pissed off with it and being a bit grumpy.
Certainly, and I think that, I mean, I'm not a specialist per se, but I think that when I've read about mental health issues, and when I say mental health, it's a bit of a bucket term at the moment, isn't it? But the sort of minor issues that we all face, like the kind of overwhelm and anxiety and a little bit of like sadness and things like that, a lot of these sort of conditions come about because of control, right? You want something to be a certain way and it isn't, and so then you become upset about it. And sometimes you can move on from it easily, and sometimes you can let it get to you quite a lot. But I think that I realized how much stuff comes down to control when I read that book. And so what happened from that point was I started to analyze my life a little bit, and it's the first time that I authentically looked at what I was doing and was going, right, is this where I want to live? Is this person the person I want to be with? Is this job the right job for me? And I went through all these kind of processes, and I thought that I was sort of getting it sussed, because this is what happens quite often, and this is one of the reasons that I've written the book in the way I've written it. But when you read books that are very theoretical, and a lot of people read books like that, you read it and you put it down and you go, right, that's it, I'm fixed. And then because of this stuff, and at that time, I left my work. So that was the important thing. I took a decision to leave work, and a couple of months after.
Is this, sorry, to have some time off or to change career?
Well, I didn't know at the time, but the company had made some redundancies, and they didn't make me redundant. But I sort of said to them, look, my wife's mum at the time had cancer and she was struggling, and I found that with the job, and because of, like we said before, I'm not I haven't behaved authentically, should we say, for so many years. When finally I got tested and I had to like assess where my values lied, was it with my job or my family or myself, I was useless. So when my wife was dealing with that, and when her mum eventually died, I was crap, and I was no good whatsoever. And so what I did is I managed to leave work. And I've been very, very fortunate because they gave me a voluntary redundancy, and then I took 9 months off. Unfortunately for my wife, because I'd read a couple of self-help books and because I took 9 months off, all of a sudden I was Mahatma Gandhi. I'm like walking around the house like, you should think like this. You should let that stuff, you should let this stuff go. Like, she's just lost her mum. And I'm saying to her, you realise that the Stoic philosophers would have said, well, death comes to us all. She's looking at me like, I want to fucking kill you. So ultimately, I started reading these books and researching this stuff, but until I actually started to put it into action and started to sort of actually apply it to myself rather than trying to sort of, like my dad used to say, empty cans make the most noise. I needed to actually embody that stuff because I think the philosophy part needed some action. And so, that, to answer your question in the long way, those kind of set of events, my mother-in-law passing away because she was living with us as well, which I didn't mention, but it made it extra hard there. My wife grieving, and then this sort of career situation that I'd broken away from. That was the kind of changing point. That was around May 2017. And yeah, so that's when everything sort of changed, some for the better and some gradually for much better.
Sorry to hear about your wife's mum. I mean, that sounds traumatic in itself for everyone, I'm sure, who was involved in that. So sorry that that happened. You did mention that you were, in your own words, crap in that time. What do you mean by that? And what perhaps would you do differently if you had that time over again?
Firstly, I was still trying to control everything way too much. And so I don't know how close you've been to grief before, but trying to pin someone who's like lost someone down to what meals you're going to have at the weekend because you're trying to be healthy, or like, we must meditate on Sunday because it's good for you, and I'm telling you it's good for you. You just become an arsehole, really. I mean, I thought that even though I was pretending to do it all for her, the world revolved around me. There was that kind of that ego that exists in all of us had sort of come out a bit. And so when I say I was crap, there was that selfish element, but there was also I didn't know what to do because I would have told you that being a husband was really important to me, but I couldn't tell you that I'd put much effort into it, or that I'd, in the journey of our life together, it's just coincidental that we got on and everything else. Like, I think that when you actually realize that you have a value that's authentic to you and you do stuff towards it, you become better at it, and it becomes more enriching. And obviously I hadn't done that. So when the difficult times came, I didn't really know how to react. And I sort of froze a little bit and became selfish and moved away, almost like reclined from my wife's grief, and sort of started looking after myself, which is obviously not great. And yeah, so that led to some sort of discontent at home, which thankfully now is sort of resolved, is the wrong term, I guess, but because we've gone through all of this together, we're stronger, like as people say. But you do need to, you need to work at a relationship. I'm not here to give relationship advice, but even in the good times, I think you should be doing some of the work to understand how you're both changing and how you're both feeling, and how you I don't want to use the term love language because it's a bit wanky, but understanding each other's emotions and what people like and what they don't, and what their needs are. Because what we found is that when our needs sort of slightly moved apart, I'd stopped drinking and I'd started to not look after myself, but do this mental journey. And at the same time, her kids have just started to go to school, and she's lost her mum, and we're spiraling off in two different directions. And because we never had those hard conversations, like we could have had the conversation of, what would you do if this happened, or what would you expect from me if this happened, or what's a non-negotiable or a boundary, that we hadn't had any of those conversations. And so we came very close to sort of like,
do you have them now?
We do, yeah. It's not as often as
how do you do that? As in, yeah, does it just come up, or is there a how does that happen?
I mean, this is again not perfect, but I think just the intention is a positive. Firstly, the things that I've gone through individually that have changed my persona a little bit make me a better person to be married to, I hope. But with us, we have a few meetings and stuff, because I have a tendency to just ramble all the way through the week. And also, if you have a discontent with each other, it gets blown up much worse if you have the argument immediately. And so a therapist told me about having a cooling off period. And so what we try to do is we try to save anything that we're unhappy about. And we have a chat once a week where we just kind of sit down and go, right, is everything all right with you? Is everything all right with you? And then maybe you'll bring something up that bothered you. But what you find is the things that would bother you in the moment that would lead to a big row, you've forgotten about them by Friday night, and you're sort of like, oh, actually, do I need to mention the fact that you rearranged the plates that I put in the dishwasher, and you don't trust me to remember to do this or that? This stuff can all fade away, and all that's left is the big issues, if there are any. But I'm not saying that's perfect. We're still like everyone else.
Yeah, I get that. It's not necessarily advised, but it's just interesting to hear what you do. So yeah, thank you for that.
This podcast is obviously called Life Changes, and you've obviously been through a big one yourself, Nick. You mentioned therapy there. Would you say that was instrumental to a life change, and what did you learn about yourself?
I would advise therapy for anyone, really. There's certainly benefits to it. I think it's talking to someone. I mean, you can't really do a podcast. You guys can do a podcast every week, so maybe that could be your therapy. But there's not always someone that you're separated enough from to have the conversation, right? A lot of my friends don't really want to. That's not what our relationship is. They don't want to hear me turn around and go, oh, I was feeling like really vulnerable this week and I wasn't validated by my father. They don't want to hear that. So a therapist is just someone to have a ramble to, and the next best thing would probably be to have a journal of some description, I suppose. But therapy helped me. You have to find the right therapist. I think I found a therapist that challenged me, and within 30 minutes he said, fucking hell, you're exhausting. And I was like, oh, okay. And it just kind of led on to like a different approach that I'd had before. I'd always had therapists that were like sitting with your nan having a cup of tea, and she'd go, oh, you can do it. Don't worry, you're doing great. And it was almost like an affirming thing. Whereas this guy was giving me fucking homework and telling me this, that. Have you ever questioned this? And have you questioned that? Watch this video, read this book.
You needed like Grant Mitchell, not your nan. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly right. Yeah, I mean, his name's Nick as well, but I'm not sure he'd want to be referred to as Grant Mitchell. He was a heroin addict at one point, and so he's worked in rehabs. He's worked in prisons and rehab centres and stuff like that. So he's a lot more of a, should we say, alpha personality. But he'll call you on your bullshit, which is kind of what I needed. So I would say it's more about finding something that works for you.
And that could be that could be actually someone like your nan type thing could be great for some people, and then other people need to be a bit more challenging, like you said, called out on the bullshit a bit more quickly, so you can actually challenge yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. And like we joked a little bit earlier with Chris, some people want to approach things in slightly different ways. And I spoke to a mental health charity sometimes, and one of the people I was talking to there is the challenge they have is getting people into mental health events and therapy and things, because a lot of people, men in particular, hear those words and they're like, oof, that's not for me. And they sort of remove themselves from it. So firstly, that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because I want to have a sort of relatable voice in there somewhere, so that it's not, men in particular will do everything they can to say, oh, well, that person had a rock bottom with drugs, so that's not me, so I don't need to listen to that. Or that person's a celebrity, so what would they know? I don't have to listen to that. That person's a psychiatrist, so yeah, they're some nerd. I don't need to listen to that. So there's almost like there's not enough people that are just bumming along doing the normal stuff, but trying to do it a bit better, that can encourage people into it. So it's interesting trying to get people into therapy. Might not always be, like you said, therapy. It could be, there's a thing near me where there's a group of guys that go walking in Southend, and basically they wear these like bright yellow t-shirts so everyone know who they are, and the idea is you can join them for a walk. Anyone can just come and walk alongside them, and people do. And the fact is, people then open up and have a little chat, because you're a little bit removed, and people turn up and say, I'm having a bit of a trouble with my wife or work or whatever it is, and they all sort of chat. And I think that's very helpful for some people, so I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Like, I don't think, obviously I think men are worse than women at this. Sorry to be sexist about that, but obviously men high suicide rate, and a lot of it is cultural, because we're taught to be strong masculine men, blah blah blah. So yeah, it's interesting to hear that's out there. And I think nature's a really good way of it happening naturally. I think part of it, to my mind, is, let's say you're out for a walk with someone else, you're not sat across each other across a coffee table or something like that, sort of looking directly at each other. You're just out for a walk and stuff just comes out. And yeah, it's nice to hear that there's stuff like that going as well that people can access.
I went up Scaffold Pike the last year for my anniversary with my wife, and we had a bit of a bad weather situation where we got lost a couple of times trying to come back down again. And there's there's nothing to sort of like get you opening up and and being vulnerable than shitting yourself up a mountain. So yeah, I agree. Nature
Yeah.
nature does help. I
I'm
mean,
not necessarily advocating that bit. Yeah.
but honestly, the commitments we were making to each other, Jesus, I hope she doesn't hold me to any of those.
You need to watch Chris's YouTube video on how to shit up a mountain, clearly. I think it's not your most popular YouTube video, Chris.
Pretty much.
Well, I just did it in my pants, so that was fine.
So Nick, it's been a hell of a journey by the sounds of it, and I guess part of the life change has been writing this book, ABCD, Finding Happiness Through Awareness, Values, Principles, and Actions. Can you just tell us a bit about the book, how you came to write it?
What I noticed first off is that even though I'd sort of tattooed X equals Y on my arm and I'd read self-help books, nothing really stuck. So when we got to COVID time, it kind of fell apart a little bit, because it's all well and good sort of knowing stuff, but you need to put it into action. And so what happened then is that I started to write down little tools and tips and questions and the sort of thought experiments that would help me sort of get back into that place where I was sticking to the things that I knew would serve me best. And so what that meant is that I could actually start applying the stuff. And when I started to apply the stuff, I became a lot calmer. I became a better person to be around. I stopped being so selfish. I think a lot of us could do with not being so selfish and looking around me and going, right, what do my kids and my wife need? And what do my friends need, rather than what do I need all the time? And as I was writing this down, this little flip book became bigger and bigger and bigger. And I thought, right, I'm going to just put this down somewhere as a kind of document that I can do for myself. And I started it, and it ended up being 90,000 words long. And so I said to myself, right, that's not really like 90,000 words of waffle. And I was just like, right, this is silly, because I'm never going to go back and go, oh, page 76 of the waffle. So it was clear to me there was enough there to kind of make a framework and make something useful. And it was more about understanding how I was going to do that. And what I noticed when I was pulling all of these different ideas together, all the tools that I'd used, that I'd never done this before, I pulled them into sort of categories. So the first category was authenticity. So this is stuff about aligning your values with your actions and doing things for your purpose and not for other people's, and questioning why things are important to you rather than just sort of going off your old storylines in your head and stuff like that. And so the second part is balance. And balance, you hear it a lot. And obviously I was telling myself for years to be balanced. Don't drink at this time of during the week, or don't do this and don't do that. But balance is quite a hard one. Balance is a buzzword, like you were saying before, but it's one of those buzzwords that it's actually quite difficult to get balance. People are setting really unrealistic resolutions left, right and center, and everyone just thinks they're going to have a six-pack and be a crypto millionaire. And actually you need to look at what time you have available for these things, how important they are in your life, and then just be comfortable. Just be like, okay, well, I can only afford to do exercise 3 half an hours a week because I've got other commitments with my other values, like my family and my job and everything else. And so I have to be happy with having the physique that someone who exercises for 30 minutes a week has. It's the problem we have is that we set ourselves, I want to have a six-pack. We exercise 3 half an hours a week. We don't get a six-pack, and then we beat ourselves up about it. And so as though we're some kind of failure. And then the next thing we do is go, right, we'll go one step further. We'll have some extreme intervention. And sometimes that leads to things like addictions and eating disorders and all this kind of stuff.
Sorry to interrupt you, Nick, but I like the bit where you're talking about balance in terms of you can't be, or very, very unlikely to be, the CEO of IBM, plus be the best dad in the world, plus be the top scorer for your local football team, plus all of these things that all come at an opportunity cost. I like the way you have portrayed that. I think it's a good one.
The other thing is that we use all of these things as a tool to disappoint ourselves with. We use them all because if you're not the top scorer of your local football team, no one else gives a shit. It's only you that cares. So this kind of unattainable goal that you've set, that you're the only one who cares about, is now being used by you to make you feel bad. It's insane.
I think we all kind of do it to a greater or lesser extent, but when you put it like that, it does sound completely insane, doesn't it?
Yeah, because my wife's not going, oh God, he didn't even get top goal scorer this year. I think I might leave him. Or maybe she is. I mean, the top goal scorer is a hunk. But but the problem, the thing is that what we're trying to do is create this kind of balance of expectations. And there is a tool in the book about that I call value dials, which is dialing up and down your values in comparison to each other and seeing how they affect each other. Sure, you might want to be like these professional footballers, for example. You talk about football; they've sacrificed so much to do this. I think we kind of see them as like jumped up young millionaires, but they've sacrificed an awful lot of their life to do this, and they're not going to be able to be very well educated at the same time. They're just not, because you can't study and train the amounts that you need to do both those things. And so they have decided that for them the balance is the extreme, right? But I would argue that for the most of us, for the majority of us, that the balance that we need is having a little bit of everything that's important to us. And maybe we dial it up. Maybe you have an exam coming up and you dial up the study, or you have a holiday coming up and you dial up the exercise. But you've got to accept that when you dial up the exercise, you might not see your friends as much as you did before. And if seeing your friends is a more, or being out in nature, for example, is a more valid thing that enriches you more, we've got to try and remember that we want to enjoy the journey a lot more than the destination, because the destination isn't promised. And so sacrificing this stuff for something in the short term might be okay, but some of us sacrifice it for years. And particularly with things like diet and exercise, people change a diet every few months, which means they're miserable all the time and they never ever hit the target. And I suppose when they die, they won't be going, I'm really glad that eventually 18 years in I managed to get a six-pack. They'll be thinking, what the fuck was I doing with those 18 years when I wasn't seeing my friends and I wasn't enjoying a bit of cake and all this kind of stuff. So that's what I'm getting at with balance. Now, I call that side of the framework the sort of like the softer side. And what sometimes happens is that people understand those two concepts, but the problem is that that's it. That's where it stops. And that can lead to you being a bit maybe lazy, or being like, well, okay, well, I'll just go easy on myself. I'll be balanced. I haven't got the time anyway. But I think you have to, the balance also comes with, you need some of the tougher stuff. And so the C and the D stand for consistency and discipline. And there's an idea of flow that I use.
So just for our listeners, sorry, Nick, it's like A, B, C, D, A, authenticity, B, balance, and now we're on to consistency, C, consistency.
Yeah, so the C is consistency. This is the kind of the bit of hard work that's on the other side of the coin, really. Consistency is really just about acting in line with your values regularly so that you build up this kind of self-confidence that you can do stuff. So it's breaking down these big values and goals rather than just having the overarching issue that could be quite daunting, breaking it into different areas and then again into kind of actions. So things you can do every day, whether that be practicing something or writing something or making that phone call to your mum or whatever. Those things will then add up into that bigger value because you're doing them consistently. And so it's a lot easier to achieve something in those small steps than it is to just attack something head on from the top, really.
So consistency is the C and D is the discipline. What's the difference in consistency and discipline?
When you've already picked something that is going to make your life better, you've picked an approach that's balanced and you've broken it down in a way that means that you've got these small actions. Really, you've got no excuse to not do it. And so this part of the book is more just about learning from failure, not letting things, the obstacle is the way kind of thing, and just keeping you on track and how you can make things challenging so that you're not kind of flying by the seat of your pants and you're not bored shitless at the same time.
Okay, cool. And then I think, well, what I really liked about the book is it's not just something you read, it's a workbook, so it's interactive. And so bringing that ABCD alive, you've spoken about what they mean, but actually we're going to talk, well, about turning things into actions. So I think we're going to do a bit of a worked exercise that if you're listening, now is a great time to pause, go grab a pen and paper, because we're going to come on to a little bit of exercise that you can join in for.
So you've noticed already in the book, it is available as an e-book. I would urge people to get a paperback. It's the first tool within the worksheet section of the book. It's an authenticity tool and it's called Core Value Prioritization. And the idea of this tool, and this can be used for anyone really. I mean, I think that the idea of these tools is that you take what you can use, you leave the rest behind. It's not prescriptive, it's not dogmatic, it's not everyone do exactly as I'm saying. You don't even necessarily have to do them in order. What I really want is for you to find the bits that you find interesting. But one of the benefits, or one of the biggest elements, is this finding this authenticity. And so, Chris, I know that you worked on this first one here, and do you have your answers with you there?
I do, yeah. So I'm going to be a bit of a guinea pig, and I think we're going to work our way through it.
Right, so I've got a copy of the book there for those who are watching. If you're listening, unfortunately, you won't be able to see that. But so what we've got here is core value prioritization. And so what you'll need to do if you're doing this at home is just a piece of paper would be fine. I mean, there's a couple of questions here that we're going to run through. And the idea of this exercise is we're going to take the things that you think are important in your life now, and we're just going to run a few little checks, little sense checks over them that hopefully gets to the point where we can reword them, because the way you talk to yourself is very important, the way you put things down, and maybe adjust them a little bit so that they can be more authentic to you. And hopefully some of them you might think, well, actually, I don't have any control over this, so I need to get rid of it anyway. So if we start, and we'll use Chris as the dummy, but at home, if you can maybe fill some of these things out. Now, the first question is, pick up to 10 areas of your life that are most important. Now, obviously, we may not have time to go through 10. And if you want to pause this at home, you can fill out as many as you want. But Chris, you wrote a few down. So what are your sort of top ones there that you've got?
Yeah, so I did go for all 10, but I found the first 5 came out really quickly. The second sort of half came out a bit slower. So the ones I've written down in order are family, health and longevity for number 2, happiness for number 3, friendship/connection for number 4, and relationship for number 5.
Cool. So you can already see, I can already see there that there's a lot of, I'm not going to try and pretend I'm a therapist, but there's a lot of, there's things about connection and relationships, because the family and the connection and the other stuff. So, and even the connection with your health and with your own body, right? So there's some interesting themes there to start with. Now, when people write these first sets of answers down, they're sort of one-word answers, right? Family. So these things are a little bit hard to sort of define and break down if we don't really know what they are. So the first thing that comes next is that question 2 is, can you control the outcomes in these areas? And the options are yes, no, and partial. So obviously, yes, if it's entirely up to you and your thoughts. No, if it's got nothing to do with you, and partial if you can sort of control some of it.
For the family bit, I put partially. And then for all the other 4, I put yes. So I think I can control my health and longevity, my happiness, friendship and connection, and relationship.
So I would argue a little bit there, but I won't argue too fervently. But technically, some of those things are also maybe partially, because you can't control whether you get ill in the long term and everything else. But in sense of, this tells me that because you're saying yes, you're not just thinking about health and longevity, because some of that is outside of your control. I think you're talking about fitness and the sort of health that you can control, like the way you eat and what you put in your body and things like that. So these are ones that a lot of people have. They're very, very, very common sort of values and goals that people have. So what we do then is that if you've got any in there that are partially in your control, what is the bit you can control? Like we want to define what this value is, because the value, when people say their value is family, like you have there, like I said, it's a very broad topic. So what are the bits that you can control in this value that you hold around family?
Yeah, so for family, I put it to have partial control. Yeah, I'm like who I'm in touch with and how often. Number 2, so health and longevity, I put what I eat and exercise/relax. Number 3, happiness, I think I have control over some of that through positive mindset, being grateful and smiling. Number 4, friendship and connection, I've put that I can make more effort to stay in touch.
Okay, so there's, I think we're already seeing there, aren't we? We're seeing that there's a few answers there, and I think people at home will be probably noticing little trends as they're writing these things down. They might not all be about connection. For other people, it might be all about effort or something like. But with you, there's a lot of stuff here about, it's about how you connect and how much you connect and who you give your energy to. And I think that's really important. So question 4 is, in 2 or 3 words, how does improvement in these areas enrich your life? So the reason for this is, are these things actually going to sort of like improve your life if they get any better? Because we spend a lot of time worrying about things that even when we get them, they're not going to make your life better. And the classic example is the 6-pack or the £1 million or whatever it is. So with your ones, Chris, like what are the things that what brings the enrichment to your life out of each of these things?
So for family, number one, how does improvement in these areas enrich my life? So I put love and care for others and to get the same back. So for health and longevity, that enriches my life by having I think a happier life as you go along, more enjoyable, and just being in control and managing my physical well-being. Number three, happiness. I said I want to enjoy that long life. So I guess the last one a little bit was about living long, but you want to enjoy that long life as well. Number four, friendship and connection. So I put make life meaningful. So yeah, I think that's a big, I guess, value driver for me, and that's important. So yeah, makes life more meaningful.
And cool. So the next section is to select, to minimize the amount. Now, obviously, you've already chosen a smaller group because we went through them in that order. But for the people at home, if you have written a larger amount, what you'll start to see is that some of these are out of your control. Some of these aren't really going to enrich your life if you get them, if you were really honest with yourself. And so we get to a point where we want to cut some away. And that's what I like about this, is that this is about getting rid of the shit, cutting away the noise, and just finding things to focus on. Because if you've done this work and then you have these things to focus on, then it does give you a bit more clarity, I find. So once you've cut some down, what I'm writing here now is, and this comes from dialectics, which is how we talk to ourselves. And so what I asked...
And sorry, Nick, just to jump in there, I really like that, because at the very beginning, we're keeping the net quite wide open and you're putting 10 things that are of importance to you. And it's really interesting. Like I say, the first 5 came easily. The others I had to think about a tiny bit more. It still only took a couple of minutes. But as you say, I guess this goes back to your B, balance bit, which is you can't do everything. You can't decide, as you say, to go out and get a 6-pack while spending more time with family, while spending more time with friends, blah, blah, blah. So now we're like narrowing it down to just these 5 in this next step, to be like, what of those things that we do have some control over should we start thinking about focusing on? See, for me, I don't think my 5 actions at the end almost, or takeaways, were not necessarily actually related to my most important values, but they were the sort of, let's say, low-hanging fruit of stuff I could actually do stuff about. So that's why I really like this.
What's important here is like how we talk to ourselves, because this is a bit of visualization, I would say. What I say here is, with your possible core values and goals in mind, rephrase your above as, I am the type of person who. And so what this makes you do is define a characteristic in yourself that relates to this value. So this is not you and then the value separately. This is you embodying the value or the goal. So you'll know when you write it out, oh shit, this doesn't sound right. This isn't what I mean, or I'm not that type of person. That feels uncomfortable, right? You'll know straight away, because you've started making them a little bit more personal. So maybe if just for your top 2, if you could do, I am the type of person who, and then how would you word that?
So for number 1 of those 5 that would narrowed it down to, my number 1 was friendship/connection. So I put, I am the type of person with friendship and connection that makes some effort. So yeah, I feel I make some effort, but I could be better. There's room for improvement. And then for number two was the relationship side of stuff. And I put, I'm the type of person who needs to stay focused. And I guess what I mean about that, just to bring it alive, it's easy to, I guess I have, if I'm actually authentic with myself, I know what I'm looking for in, let's say, another half or a relationship or partner. I do have quite a narrow definition, but it's easy to get distracted, should we say, from that sometimes. So yeah, need to stay focused is what I'd written there.
So what you end up with here is that in the last part, you just write down what your core values are, like, and what your goals are. What is it that you want to do with what is it you want to do with this element? And so maybe if you can read yours, and then we can sort of define why that makes them easier to follow than they were at the beginning.
Yeah, so bringing those down then. So my friendship/connection one, my core goal or value is spending more one-to-one time with my mum and my sister. And for the relationship part, I put my core values or goals are to know what I don't want as well as what I do want.
Perfect. So in terms of like what we started out with, which was just the word family and just the word relationships, what we've realised is that family is so broad anyway, but what people at home might have found is that maybe they had to be fit or something like that, and then that might have broken down into something like to play a team sport, because they've realized that actually what they needed was the connection that comes through that kind of stuff. And in your case, there's a lot of stuff here about connection and about making effort. I mean, it feels like you want to receive love, but you also know that you need to make the effort to give some of that back. You get what you give, if you see what I mean.
So, I mean, I do see my family once a week, but for example, yesterday, my mum sent me a message saying, do I want to go to the garden centre for a coffee? And I wanted to be better. I wanted to say yes, but at the same time, this is in the middle of the week, in the middle of the work day, and I feel stressed and on the back foot because I've been a bit unwell lately, and then there's lots to do and an event coming up, and so I feel a bit on the back foot. So I do know that, I guess if we go back to the authenticity bit, like that is more my spending an hour with my mum for a coffee 1-to-1 is always going to be more important than my work. But I've said no to it, and there's a bit of guilt around that because I felt I needed to get on with work.
Yeah, and I suppose what we're saying there is that's that cognitive dissonance that's happening in real life. Because you're not acting in line with your values, that doesn't mean drop everything to go and see your mum, right? I mean, I'd suggest there are some circumstances where that might be needed, but in this instance, it could be the case that you go, well, actually, mum, I can't see you at the garden centre. And what a lot of us would do is go, because I'm busy with work, shut the phone down, get rid of that problem, and then have this guilt burning in the background for the rest of the day. What you might do, knowing that that's a value, is you'll like you're doing now, you'll identify, well, actually, I should go and see her. So at least then that gives you the driver to turn around and go, I can't come now because I'm working, but how about I pop over after work? There just might be something you can do that kind of like, it keeps you in line with your values, but at the same time, you have got other values as well. And one of those is to run your business, right? So the idea there is that we come through this process, and this is the most heavy, should we say, part of the process, because we're trying to whittle away the noise. And then when we move on, there's some other steps, and I won't describe them all in detail. But what the idea here is that then the reader then moves on to the next parts and sort of works out how much time they've got to answer these things and how their values interact with each other, and then kind of draws down into these smaller actions. And really what you end up with is a set of daily actions or monthly or weekly actions, whatever, that you're fully aware of because they're authentic to you. There's not going to be any sort of issue in your brain about why you need to do these things because you do it already. You don't have to think about it every day. And then you just sort of work towards those things. And the reason I call it Finding Happiness, even though the title was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, is that the happiness that comes from just doing those things and knowing you're making progress and knowing that you're taking these small steps on a journey, it's very satisfying. It fills you with confidence to know that you're doing the right things. And I bring loads of studies in around the remembering self and the experiencing self and how the brain sees when you delay gratification and when you challenge yourself, etc. And so this is all backed with what I've used on myself and what I've read from all these other sources. So what I'd hope is that the reader of the book can use these worksheets and really break things down into just some easy steps that can alleviate some of the overwhelm. And we've got a lot of information in this world at the moment, and I think that we probably think there's a lot more needed of us than there actually is. I think we can just simplify things a little bit and be a lot happier.
Yeah, awesome.
I really like the exercise because I heard this adage or saying the other day, which was, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And it's kind of, there's lots of different ways of saying it, but if what your values are, then you've just got much more confidence in your all aspects of your life. We all knew or still know the people or the kid at school who'd sort of say, oh, go and do this and go and do that. And they wouldn't have a clue if that was the right thing to do or not, because they just didn't know themselves, right? They just didn't know what their values were. So it's like, I think the Americans call it balanced or centered or something. You can actually, when you go around, especially when you've kind of, like you have, Nick, looked to this stuff a lot, if you meet people in life now, I'm sure, I mean, some people just say they've got their shit together, which is basically just a way of saying they know what their values are. They know themselves better. So when you say to them, oh, do you fancy doing X, Y, and Z? They actually know pretty much straight away, does that align with my values? No, I don't want to do that. Or, yeah, that does align with my values. I do want to do that.
like you said, they just know. You don't even need to ask that question in their head, right? It just comes naturally. And what you also find that those people have boundaries, and those are the people that say no to the things that don't serve them, and they stay away from the people that don't serve them, and they stay away from the things that don't serve. We've got a lot of people around us in everyday life that just go along, like you said, with everything, and it's not just young people, it's adults as well. And so what my aim here is not to say that I've got it perfect, because I haven't, because even though I know I shouldn't look at my phone, the first thing I do when we turn this podcast off is I'm going to look at my phone, even though it's almost 10 o'clock at night. But the awareness in itself brings some happiness. I mean, with people who stop drinking, for instance, they say it's a lot easier to make one decision than to make 10 decisions a day. And so the idea there is that because you've made that one big decision, all the other decisions don't need to be made. You don't need to think about whether you're going to have a drink over and over and over and over. And it's the same with this value setting. If you're the sort of person who values your family above all else, and you've assessed that, and that's the most important thing, to have this one-to-one time with your sister and your mum, if you've been neglecting it and your friends say, do you want to go down the pub? It might hurt at the time, but you'll probably go and see your mum, and you won't regret it. Yeah, no one ever regrets that. Unfortunately, in the moment, the experiencing self will be screaming at you, get down that pub, Chris. But the reality is that you won't regret it, even if you just pop in for 10 minutes first. It will just delay your night by half an hour or something. You'll never regret doing the things if they're in line with what your values are.
That's maybe a nice segue, actually, to talk about the 3 tips for life, which is a new regular part of our podcast. So, Nick, have you had a chance to think about what 3 tips for life might be for our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming when you say tips, you mean for a happy life, to be happy with your life.
Yeah, and that's a good one, actually. I should couch that, because one of our previous guests said something practical: don't buy a car in December, which I loved. Very practical. And other tips can be a bit more deep and meaningful. So it doesn't need to be deep and meaningful, but it can be.
Right, okay, yeah. So it can be don't eat fish on a Monday, or it can be something a bit more thoughtful. I mean, so I was going to try and shoehorn 4 things and choose A, B, C, D, but I think that's a bit cheesy. Instead, the things that help me the most, that I've sort of kept in as sort of daily practices, are to write something down. Number 1 is to, if you have problems or if you have considerations, you have things building up in your head, just to scribble them down. I think that a problem written down becomes a lot less powerful once you're looking at it on the page. The other one is to get outside. Any day where I blink and I realise that I've been sat at a computer all day is not a good day in terms of how you feel. It's just, even just a 10-minute walk around the block is so beneficial. And if you're lucky to live in some of the places that you are, we haven't discussed this with the listeners, but 2 of you are in 2 of the most beautiful places in the world while I'm sat in Essex, so cheers. But if you get a chance to go out into the outside, then that's the second one. And the last one is,
Nick, you should get this on your value thing. You need to get that higher up your actionable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, I disparage Essex, but we live nearby loads of fields, and we get to walk the dogs in the fields. So that's a little bit tongue in cheek. But the last one is a lot more of a practical one, and it's just get off your fucking phone. Just wherever possible, wherever you have the need for sort of like your body to do a natural function, maybe aside from using the toilet, perhaps, get rid of your phone, because you need to sleep. Your body's distracted by the light from the phone. When you wake up, I always find I wake up, I start looking at my phone, and then all of a sudden I go, oh shit, I've got to get ready for work. Whereas if I don't look at my phone at all, then I get into work on time, and then I can look at it later. Like, there's nothing that urgent on there. So yeah, so that would be my advice: a little bit less screen time, get outside and write things down.
Fantastic. That was brilliant. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yep, thank you very much, Nick. And if anyone wants to buy the book, we'll put a link below, but it's Nicholas Bunney, ABCD, and the full title. Go on, Nick. What's the full title?
Finding happiness through awareness, values, principles, and actions. I don't say the whole thing very often, but it's available on Amazon. And if you want a company that actually is a little bit less of a big bad corporation, it's available on many online bookstores, and also a health centre in London called the Finchley Clinic. So if you go on their website, they sell it too. So that's a UK business.
Yeah, we'll do that. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nick.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's Chris here from Adventure Solos, where we help people in their 30s, 40s and 50s to rediscover themselves and meet new people. If you'd like to find out more about Adventure Solos events, visit adventuresolos.com. That's adventuresolos.com. where you're very welcome to stay in touch by joining the mailing list. So adventuresolos.com and enter your details to sign up to the mailing list.